What if you discovered that the only thing standing between you and your greatest potential was your mind? Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins is more than a memoir. It's a challenge to break through every mental barrier holding you back. Goggins, a former Navy SEAL and ultra-endurance athlete, transformed himself from an overweight, insecure man into one of the toughest individuals on the planet. In this video, we'll explore the relentless mindset and tools he used to turn pain into power. Are you ready to push past your limits and unlock your full potential? Let's dive in. Part 1. The beginning of David Goggins' journey. David Goggins' story doesn't begin as the tale of a man destined for greatness. In fact, his early life seemed to set him up for anything but success. Born into an abusive home in Buffalo, New York, Goggins faced the kind of challenges no child should have to endure. His father, Goggins, was a violent and controlling man who made David's childhood a living nightmare. Goggins' father owned a roller skating rink and demanded that David, his mother, and his brother work long hours every night, leaving little time for school or rest. Trunnis ruled with an iron fist, and his frequent outbursts of violence left David traumatized. As a child, he had no way to escape or fight back. He was stuck in a world of fear, abuse, and despair. Despite the outward appearance of his father's success, David's home life was anything but prosperous. His father's cruel treatment left lasting scars. David and his mother eventually made a daring escape from his father's grip when he was just 8 years old. They fled in the middle of the night, finally breaking free from the cycle of abuse. However, the damage had already been done. The trauma of his early years had left Goggins with deep emotional wounds, ones that would continue to haunt him for years to come. After escaping his father, Goggins' life didn't improve immediately. He moved with his mother to a small town in Indiana, where they struggled to make ends meet. Goggins faced racism and bullying at school, and his self-esteem plummeted. He became insecure, overweight, and deeply unhappy. By his teenage years, David was barely passing his classes and felt utterly lost. The weight of his past held him down, and he couldn't see a way out. He spent his days avoiding conflict and sinking into the shadows, trying to become invisible to escape the pain of ridicule and bullying. Goggins' poor academic performance and physical health began to spiral out of control. He developed a learning disability, which made school even more challenging. He felt like a failure in every aspect of his life. By the time he reached adulthood, Goggins was severely overweight, tipping the scales at nearly 300 pounds. He worked as a pest exterminator, killing cockroaches for a living, a job he despised. Every day was a reminder of his failures, and every night he sank further into despair. He was living a life that was far from fulfilling, and the thought of his wasted potential ate away at him. One night, while sitting on his couch, feeling miserable and helpless, Goggins happened to see a documentary on the Navy SEALs. The men on the screen were everything he wasn't: strong, disciplined, and fearless. As he watched them endure grueling physical challenges, something clicked inside him. He saw a glimpse of what he could become if he could just push past his fears and limitations. At that moment, Goggins made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would become a Navy SEAL, no matter how impossible it seemed. The path to becoming a SEAL wasn't easy. Goggins was nearly 300 pounds and had only 3 months to meet the rigorous physical requirements for SEAL training. The challenge seemed insurmountable, but Goggins was determined. He adopted a brutally strict regimen, waking up at 4:30 a.m. to work out for hours before heading to his day job. He cut out all junk food and focused on pushing his body to the limit. Every step of the way, his mind tried to convince him to quit. The voices in his head told him he wasn't good enough, that he could never make it. But Goggins had had enough of listening to those voices. He silenced them by pushing harder, running farther, and lifting more weight than he thought possible. In just 3 months, Goggins lost over 100 pounds. His determination was nothing short of extraordinary. He didn't allow himself any excuses or shortcuts, knowing that the only way to change his life was through extreme discipline and relentless hard work. By the time he applied for SEAL training, he had transformed himself from an overweight exterminator into a lean, focused machine. He was accepted into the SEAL program, but the real test was just beginning. Navy SEAL training is notorious for being one of the toughest military programs in the world. Known as Hell Week, it is designed to break the spirit of even the strongest candidates. Goggins entered Hell Week with the mindset that nothing could break him. He was prepared to suffer, to endure more pain than he ever had before, and to push beyond every limit. But even with his new mindset, the training was brutal. Goggins faced physical exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and extreme cold. Most of the other candidates dropped out, unable to withstand the relentless punishment. But not Goggins. He thrived on the suffering, using it as fuel to keep going. Every time he felt like quitting, he reminded himself that he had already been through worse in life. As the days dragged on and the challenges grew more intense, Goggins tapped into something deep inside himself. He realized that the limits he thought he had were all in his head. His body could endure far more than he had ever imagined. With each passing day, he became stronger, both mentally and physically. The pain and exhaustion became a source of pride, a sign that he was pushing beyond the ordinary. But Hell Week wasn't just about surviving. It was about excelling. Goggins didn't just want to pass the test. He wanted to dominate it. He pushed himself to outperform everyone around him, even when it seemed impossible. He adopted a mindset he called taking souls. Whenever he saw his instructors trying to break the candidates, he used it as motivation to push even harder. He wanted to break their spirit, to show them that no matter what they threw at him, he wouldn't quit. This mindset became one of Goggins' most powerful tools in life, one that he would use time and time again in the years to come. By the end of Hell Week, Goggins had not only survived but had thrived. He had proven to himself that he was capable of far more than he had ever believed. His transformation from a broken, overweight man to a Navy SEAL was complete. But Goggins wasn't satisfied. He knew that his journey was far from over. Becoming a SEAL was just the beginning. Before we continue with the next chapter, please show some love by hitting the like button so we can create more videos for you. Part 2. Pushing Beyond Limits. David Goggins may have survived Navy SEAL training, but his journey was far from over. After completing one of the most grueling military training programs in the world, he realized that what he had achieved wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The physical transformation he experienced during his preparation for SEAL training was only a small part of what he was capable of. What mattered more was how he had learned to control his mind, to push past the limits he had once believed were insurmountable. But life wasn't going to give him a break. After completing SEAL training, Goggins was deployed multiple times in combat zones, facing dangers far more intense than any training could have prepared him for. Each mission tested his endurance, strength, and most importantly, his mental resilience. But Goggins thrived in this high-pressure environment, applying the lessons he had learned during Hell Week. His ability to stay calm and focused under pressure set him apart from others. The same mindset that got him through Hell Week now helped him survive and succeed in the chaos of combat. But even though he was now a Navy SEAL, one of the most elite soldiers in the world, Goggins felt that something was still missing. There was a deeper level of toughness he wanted to reach, a level that went beyond just being a SEAL. He wanted to be uncommon among the uncommon, to push himself further than anyone else had. To do this, he had to find new ways to challenge himself. That's when he discovered ultramarathons, extreme endurance races that would take him far beyond anything he had ever done. While most people would consider completing a marathon to be a major accomplishment, Goggins wanted more. Ultramarathons cover distances of 100 miles or more, often in extreme conditions, and they require not just physical strength, but also an incredible amount of mental fortitude. Goggins didn't have any experience with long-distance running, but that didn't matter to him. He saw ultramarathons as the next logical step in testing his limits. The first race Goggins attempted was a 100-mile race in San Diego, known as the San Diego One Day, which required him to run around a 1-mile track for 24 hours straight. The goal was simple: run as many miles as possible in the given time. Most people who attempt such races spend months, even years, training and preparing their bodies for the punishment they'll endure. But not Goggins. He signed up on a whim, with little to no training. He figured his mental toughness would carry him through, just like it had in SEAL training. The race started off well enough, with Goggins pushing through the first 50 miles relatively smoothly, but then the pain started. His legs began to cramp, his feet swelled up, and he could feel the blisters forming. The miles became harder and harder to complete. By mile 70, Goggins was in agony. His body was breaking down, and he still had 30 more miles to go. Most people would have stopped at this point, but Goggins was determined to finish. He knew that his body could only take him so far. It was his mind that would have to carry him the rest of the way. As the night wore on, Goggins found himself in a new kind of pain, a deep, overwhelming agony that made every step feel like torture. His body was shutting down. He had to stop several times to go to the bathroom, where he found blood in his urine. His kidneys were failing, and his body was breaking down in ways he had never experienced before. But even then, Goggins didn't quit. He wrapped his feet in duct tape, forced himself to stand up, and kept moving forward. By the time he reached the 90-mile mark, Goggins was barely able to walk. His body was on the verge of collapse, and every fiber of his being was screaming at him to stop. But Goggins wasn't listening. He had trained himself to embrace suffering, to push through pain and discomfort in pursuit of something greater. He kept going, one agonizing step after another, until finally, after 19 hours and 6 minutes, he completed the race. He had run 101 miles in less than 24 hours. That race broke Goggins physically, but it was also a turning point for him. He realized that the human body can endure far more than we think it can. The real limit is in the mind, and by pushing through pain and suffering, we can unlock a whole new level of potential. Goggins didn't just want to be a Navy SEAL or a marathon runner. He wanted to be one of the toughest men on the planet. And this race showed him that he was capable of achieving that goal. Despite the extreme pain and damage to his body, Goggins didn't stop running. In fact, the San Diego One-Day race was just the beginning. He went on to complete several more ultramarathons, each one more brutal than the last. He competed in the infamous Badwater 135, a 135-mile race through Death Valley, known as one of the toughest endurance events in the world. Temperatures during the race often reach 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and runners must battle dehydration, heat stroke, and extreme fatigue as they make their way through the desert. For Goggins, these races weren't just about physical endurance. They were about mental toughness. Every time he completed an ultramarathon, he was pushing himself further, proving that the only real limits in life are the ones we impose on ourselves. He became addicted to the feeling of pushing past his limits, of proving to himself and others that he was capable of doing the impossible. With each race, he grew stronger, more resilient, and more determined to keep going. But Goggins' story isn't just about physical accomplishments. Throughout the book, he emphasizes the importance of mental toughness and discipline. He believes that most people give up when they're only at 40% of their true potential. It's a rule he calls the 40% rule, which states that when you think you've reached your limit, you're really only 40% of the way there. The remaining 60% is untapped potential that can only be accessed by pushing through discomfort and pain. Goggins applies this rule to every aspect of his life, from his military career to his athletic achievements and even his personal growth. He believes that most people live their lives in a state of comfort, never pushing themselves to discover what they're truly capable of. But Goggins sees comfort as the enemy of growth. He argues that the only way to achieve greatness is to embrace discomfort, to seek out challenges that force you to grow and evolve. One of the key lessons Goggins teaches is the power of the mind to control your destiny. He argues that the biggest obstacle most people face is their own mind. It's not the external challenges that hold us back, but our own fears, doubts, and insecurities. By learning to control his mind, Goggins was able to overcome the limitations that had held him back for so long. He transformed himself from a man who was trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and failure into someone who could accomplish anything he set his mind to. Goggins doesn't shy away from talking about the failures and setbacks he faced along the way. He admits that he didn't always succeed, and there were times when he wanted to give up. But every failure became a stepping stone to his eventual success. He learned to view failure not as a sign of defeat, but as an opportunity to grow stronger. Each time he fell, he got back up, more determined than ever to succeed. This resilience became one of his defining traits, one that allowed him to achieve things most people would never even attempt. Part 3. Embracing the Pain. David Goggins' life was becoming a constant battle against his own mind and body, but he relished every challenge. Each new test, whether it was an ultramarathon, a military mission, or a personal goal, was an opportunity to push beyond his limits. But he knew that in order to truly transform himself, he had to embrace suffering in a way that most people never would. Goggins believed that pain and discomfort were necessary ingredients for growth. The more he experienced them, the stronger he became, both physically and mentally. After completing several ultramarathons and gaining a reputation as one of the toughest endurance athletes, Goggins wasn't content to rest on his achievements. He kept searching for new ways to challenge himself, constantly looking for the next big thing that would test his mental fortitude. But his body wasn't invincible, and the extreme physical toll of these events began to catch up with him. Despite his impressive achievements, Goggins started to suffer from chronic injuries, particularly to his knees. Doctors warned him that he might have to stop running, as the wear and tear on his joints was becoming too much. For most people, hearing such news would be a reason to slow down, maybe even to quit. But for Goggins, it was just another obstacle to overcome. He refused to let physical pain dictate his life, and he developed a mindset that he called callousing the mind. Just as calluses protect the skin from pain and injury, Goggins believed that by repeatedly exposing his mind to hardship and suffering, he could toughen it to the point where no obstacle could break him. He began to view every moment of pain as a test of his resolve. When his body was screaming for him to stop, he would push harder, knowing that each step was making him stronger. Pain became his teacher, and suffering became his ally. This mindset extended far beyond physical challenges. It applied to every aspect of his life. Whether it was a tough military mission, a difficult personal decision, or an unexpected setback, Goggins trained himself to lean into discomfort and push through it. But despite his extraordinary mental toughness, Goggins wasn't immune to setbacks. In one of the more vulnerable moments of the book, he describes a time when his body finally gave out during a race. He was competing in an ultramarathon when he collapsed from exhaustion and severe pain. His knees were swollen, his body was dehydrated, and he could barely move. For the first time in a long time, Goggins had to face the possibility that he might not be able to continue his journey. This was a turning point for him. In that moment of weakness, Goggins was forced to confront a question that many people face at some point in their lives. What do you do when your body gives up before your mind does? How do you continue when your greatest asset, your mental toughness, can't overcome the limitations of your physical self? Goggins didn't have an immediate answer. He was forced to take a break from racing and spend time recovering. But even during this period of rest, he didn't allow himself to fall into complacency. He knew that recovery was a part of the process, and rather than viewing it as a failure, he saw it as an opportunity to come back even stronger. While he wasn't able to train physically, he continued to train his mind. He read books, studied mental toughness, and developed new strategies to push himself further when he eventually returned to racing. This period of recovery was also a time for reflection. Goggins began to understand that being tough didn't just mean pushing through pain. It also meant knowing when to step back and allow yourself time to heal. He realized that there was a balance between grit and self-care, and finding that balance was essential to his long-term success. His time away from racing wasn't wasted. It was a necessary step in his journey toward becoming the strongest version of himself. When Goggins eventually returned to racing, he came back with a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer racing just to prove something to himself or others. He was racing to test the limits of human potential. He wanted to show people that the mind could overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. Goggins didn't just want to be the best. He wanted to inspire others to break through their own barriers, to show them that they too could push beyond what they thought was possible. Goggins also knew that the lessons he was learning through racing could be applied to every aspect of life. He believed that the same mental toughness that helped him endure 100-mile races could help people overcome challenges in their careers, relationships, and personal growth. Whether it was dealing with failure, overcoming adversity, or simply pushing through the discomfort of everyday life, Goggins' philosophy was clear: embrace the pain and use it to fuel your growth. But Goggins wasn't done pushing himself. Even after returning to racing, he sought out new and even more extreme challenges. One of the most grueling events he undertook was a 48-hour race called the Ultraman, which combined swimming, biking, and running over a total distance of more than 320 miles. The race tested every aspect of his endurance, but Goggins thrived in the chaos. He had trained his mind to endure the unendurable, and each step of the race was a testament to the power of mental resilience. As Goggins continued to push himself further, he realized that his journey wasn't just about racing or endurance events. It was about unlocking the potential that lies dormant in all of us. He believed that most people never come close to realizing their true potential because they are too afraid to confront pain and discomfort. Goggins saw it as his mission to help others break free from the mental chains that hold them back, to show them that they are capable of far more than they think. One of the most powerful lessons Goggins shares in the book is the idea that we are all capable of becoming uncommon among the uncommon. This phrase became a mantra for Goggins, a reminder that greatness doesn't come from being like everyone else. It comes from pushing beyond what most people are willing to do. Goggins didn't want to just be a Navy SEAL or an ultramarathon runner. He wanted to be the best, the one who stood out even among the best of the best. And he believed that anyone with the right mindset could achieve that same level of greatness. Goggins also emphasizes the importance of accountability. Throughout his journey, he relied on what he called the accountability mirror, a tool that he used to confront his weaknesses head-on. Each day, he would look in the mirror and write down the things he needed to improve on. These weren't just superficial goals. They were the hard truths about his shortcomings, the areas where he knew he needed to push himself harder. By holding himself accountable in this way, Goggins was able to stay focused on his goals and never let himself fall into complacency. Part 4. The Uncommon Path. David Goggins' life by this point was a testament to the power of mental toughness and discipline, but his journey was far from over. Despite his numerous accomplishments, he still felt driven by a deep, almost insatiable hunger to push himself further. His mindset of becoming uncommon among the uncommon wasn't just about being the best in any single domain. It was about breaking every barrier, physical or mental, that life placed in front of him. Goggins wanted to be the kind of person who would thrive in situations that would destroy others, to be a man who couldn't be hurt, regardless of the challenges thrown his way. As Goggins continued to compete in ultramarathons and other extreme endurance events, he began to notice a shift in the way people perceived him. To many, he became a symbol of resilience, someone who represented what it meant to push through pain and emerge stronger on the other side. But while Goggins appreciated the recognition, he wasn't interested in praise. For him, there was always more to be done. There was always another challenge, another goal that would push him further. He wasn't racing for medals or accolades. He was racing against himself, constantly looking for ways to outdo the man he was yesterday. It was around this time that Goggins started to reflect more deeply on his purpose. What was driving him to push so hard? Why couldn't he just be satisfied with the extraordinary things he had already achieved? The answer, Goggins realized, was that he wasn't just competing for himself. He wanted to show others what was possible when they learned to master their own minds. He wanted to inspire people to stop living within the confines of their comfort zones and start chasing their potential with everything they had. For Goggins, the world was full of people who were held back by their own fears, doubts, and insecurities. He knew this feeling all too well. After all, he had spent the first part of his life crippled by self-doubt, by the weight of his past, and by the belief that he wasn't good enough. But through sheer willpower, he had transformed himself into someone unrecognizable from the man he once was. And he believed that others could do the same, if only they were willing to face their fears and embrace the pain. Goggins began sharing his message more publicly, giving talks and interviews where he explained the mental strategies he used to overcome adversity. He didn't sugarcoat the truth, nor did he offer any shortcuts. His message was simple but powerful. If you want to change your life, you have to be willing to suffer. You have to be willing to push through pain, discomfort, and fear. Only by doing so could you unlock your full potential. One of the key elements of Goggins' philosophy was the idea that most people live at just a fraction of their true capacity. He believed that when people think they've reached their limit, whether in a race, a workout, or even a stressful situation at work, they're really only at 40% of what they're capable of. This 40% rule became a central tenet of Goggins' teachings. He argued that the human mind is conditioned to protect the body from harm, which means that it often tells us to stop long before we're actually in danger of doing real damage. The key to unlocking your potential, Goggins said, was to push past that mental barrier and tap into the remaining 60%. For Goggins, the 40% rule wasn't just a motivational slogan, it was a way of life. He had experienced it firsthand during his military career, in his ultramarathons, and in his daily training sessions. Every time he felt like quitting, he reminded himself that he was only 40% of the way there, that there was still more left in the tank. And each time he pushed past that barrier, he grew stronger. The 40% rule became his guiding principle in every challenge he faced, whether physical or mental. Goggins's relentless pursuit of excellence began to take him into new realms of personal growth. He started to explore not just his physical limits, but also his emotional and psychological limits. He realized that in order to become truly unstoppable, he needed to confront the emotional pain he had been carrying for so long, the trauma of his childhood, the fear and insecurity that had once ruled his life. Goggins knew that if he didn't face these demons head-on, they would continue to hold him back. One of the most difficult parts of Goggins' journey was learning to forgive himself for his past mistakes. He had spent so many years running from the pain of his childhood, burying it beneath layers of physical and mental toughness. But he knew that in order to truly move forward, he needed to address the emotional wounds that had shaped him. This process wasn't easy. It required Goggins to revisit some of the most painful memories of his life. But just as he had learned to embrace physical suffering, Goggins now embraced emotional pain, knowing that it was a necessary part of his growth. As Goggins worked through his emotional struggles, he began to notice a profound shift in the way he approached life. He had always been a man driven by external challenges, races, missions, physical tests of endurance. But now he was learning to find peace within himself. He realized that true strength wasn't just about what you could endure physically. It was about being able to face your inner fears and still move forward. This inner transformation didn't mean that Goggins stopped pushing himself physically. On the contrary, he continued to seek out new and even more extreme challenges. He wanted to prove to himself that there were no limits to what he could achieve. But now, his drive was fueled by a deeper sense of purpose. Goggins wasn't just running races or completing missions for the sake of accomplishment. He was doing it to inspire others, to show them that they too could break free from the limitations they had placed on themselves. One of the most powerful moments in Goggins' journey came when he decided to attempt the world record for the most pull-ups in 24 hours. The record stood at 4,030, an almost incomprehensible number for most people. But for Goggins, it was just another challenge, another opportunity to test his mental and physical limits. He trained relentlessly for months, preparing his body and mind for the grueling test ahead. On the day of the attempt, Goggins felt confident, ready to break the record and add another achievement to his long list of accomplishments. But things didn't go as planned. After several hours of non-stop pull-ups, Goggins's hands began to tear apart. His skin was ripping, his muscles were failing, and the pain was unbearable. With hours still left on the clock, Goggins had to make the difficult decision to stop. He hadn't broken the record, and for the first time in a long time, he felt defeated. But instead of seeing this failure as a setback, Goggins used it as fuel. He knew that the only way to truly succeed was to keep going, no matter how many times you fail. So, he healed, regrouped, and trained even harder. Months later, he attempted the record again. This time, he succeeded, completing 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours and setting a new world record. It wasn't just a physical victory. It was a testament to Goggins' belief that failure is only temporary if you keep pushing forward. Do you want to improve yourself daily? Subscribe to our channel now and get free audiobooks every day. Part 5. Overcoming Failure and Redefining Success. David Goggins had just achieved another monumental feat by setting the world record for pull-ups. But this wasn't the final victory in his journey. In fact, it was simply another step in his continuous pursuit of pushing past his limits. For Goggins, success was never about achieving a specific goal. It was about the relentless pursuit of personal growth. Every time he succeeded, he saw it as an opportunity to set an even higher bar. Every time he failed, he viewed it as a lesson to learn from, a stepping stone toward greater resilience. As Goggins reflected on his life and accomplishments, he realized that his definition of success was far different from what most people understood. To Goggins, success wasn't measured by external accolades, medals, or records. It wasn't about being the fastest or the strongest. Instead, success was about becoming the best version of yourself, constantly evolving and improving, no matter how difficult or painful the process might be. He believed that true success came from embracing the struggle, from pushing through pain, and from continually striving to be better than you were the day before. This mindset was deeply rooted in Goggins' life experiences. Growing up, he had been conditioned to think of himself as a failure. His traumatic childhood, his struggles with weight and education, and his early sense of hopelessness had all contributed to a belief that he wasn't capable of achieving much. But through sheer willpower, he had rewritten his own story. He had become a Navy SEAL, an ultramarathon runner, and a world record holder, not because he was naturally gifted, but because he refused to quit. Goggins had learned to redefine what failure meant. To most people, failure is something to be avoided at all costs, a sign that you've reached the end of the road. But for Goggins, failure was simply part of the process. Every failure taught him something new, something he could use to come back stronger. Whether it was failing his first attempts at SEAL training, not finishing an ultramarathon, or even failing to break the pull-up record on his first try, Goggins embraced each of these moments as opportunities for growth. He believed that success couldn't exist without failure, and that the key to winning in life was to keep getting back up, no matter how many times you fall. This mindset wasn't just about physical challenges. Goggins applied it to every aspect of his life, from his personal relationships to his career. He knew that in order to be truly successful, you had to be willing to face your fears, take risks, and fail, sometimes repeatedly, before you could achieve anything worthwhile. And the more you failed, the more resilient you became. Over time, Goggins had built up a mental toughness that made him almost unbreakable. He had calloused his mind to the point where no amount of pain or suffering could stop him from moving forward. But as Goggins continued to push himself physically and mentally, he also realized the importance of balance. For years, he had driven himself relentlessly, focusing on achieving one goal after another without taking much time to reflect on his inner life. His body had suffered as a result, with chronic injuries that threatened to sideline him from the activities he loved. But perhaps more importantly, Goggins had neglected the emotional and psychological aspects of his journey. As tough as he had become physically, he knew there were still parts of his past that he hadn't fully confronted. One of the most significant challenges Goggins faced was coming to terms with his own vulnerability. Throughout his life, he had built up an image of himself as someone who was invincible, who could withstand anything. But deep down, Goggins knew that he was still carrying the emotional scars of his childhood. The trauma from his abusive father, the years of self-doubt, and the fear of failure had shaped him in ways that he hadn't fully addressed. While he had developed an almost superhuman level of mental toughness, there was still work to be done on the emotional side of things. For Goggins, this was perhaps the hardest challenge of all. Confronting physical pain was something he knew how to handle. He had built his life around embracing suffering. But dealing with emotional pain was a different story. It required him to be vulnerable, to acknowledge the deep wounds he had tried to bury beneath his accomplishments. And it forced him to ask questions about himself that he had long avoided. Was he running from something? Was his constant pursuit of new challenges a way of distracting himself from the pain of his past? The process of confronting his emotional struggles wasn't easy, but Goggins knew it was necessary. He realized that true strength didn't come from pretending you were invincible. It came from being honest with yourself about your weaknesses. And just as he had calloused his mind through physical suffering, Goggins began to work on callousing his emotions, learning how to process and overcome the pain that had held him back for so long. This wasn't about ignoring his feelings or pretending they didn't exist. It was about facing them head-on and using them as fuel for growth. As Goggins reflected on his journey, he began to understand that there was no end to the process of self-improvement. There was no finish line, no point at which you could say, "I've made it." Life was a constant series of challenges, and the only way to keep growing was to keep pushing yourself beyond what you thought was possible. Whether it was in the gym, in your career, or in your personal relationships, there was always room for growth. And the moment you stopped pushing, the moment you became comfortable, was the moment you started to regress. This realization led Goggins to develop what he called the cookie jar technique. The cookie jar was a mental tool he used to remind himself of his past successes and draw strength from them during tough times. Whenever he faced a new challenge or felt like giving up, Goggins would reach into his cookie jar and pull out a memory of a time when he had overcome adversity. Whether it was completing Hell Week, finishing a brutal ultramarathon, or setting a world record, these memories served as reminders that he was capable of enduring anything. The cookie jar wasn't about resting on past accomplishments. It was about using them as motivation to keep going. Goggins also believed in the power of accountability. Throughout his life, he had relied on his accountability mirror to confront the harsh truths about himself and stay focused on his goals. This practice of self-reflection and brutal honesty was one of the most important tools in his arsenal. Every morning, Goggins would look in the mirror and ask himself hard questions. Was he living up to his potential? Was he pushing himself as hard as he could? Was he letting fear or doubt hold him back? By holding himself accountable in this way, Goggins was able to stay on track and avoid falling into complacency. But accountability didn't just apply to himself. It also extended to others. Goggins believed that everyone had a responsibility to help those around them become better versions of themselves. Whether it was through sharing his story, giving motivational talks, or simply being an example of what's possible, Goggins saw it as his duty to inspire others to break free from their limitations. He knew that most people never come close to realizing their full potential because they allow fear, doubt, and comfort to hold them back. But Goggins wanted to show people that they were capable of so much more. One of the most profound lessons Goggins shares in "Can't Hurt Me" is that we are all in control of our own destiny. No matter what circumstances we're born into, no matter what challenges we face, we have the power to shape our own lives. Goggins' story is proof of that. He went from being an insecure, overweight young man with no direction to becoming one of the toughest endurance athletes and Navy SEALs in the world. And he did it not through luck or talent, but through sheer determination and an unrelenting desire to push past his limits. Goggins' message is clear. You are capable of far more than you think. But in order to unlock that potential, you have to be willing to embrace discomfort, to face your fears, and to push through pain. It won't be easy, and there will be times when you want to quit. But if you keep going, if you keep pushing, you'll discover that you're stronger than you ever imagined. Part 6. Mastering Your Mind. As David Goggins continued his journey of relentless self-improvement, he realized that the key to his success had always been mastering his mind. The physical feats he had accomplished, from completing Navy SEAL training to running ultramarathons and setting world records, were just the visible results of the mental strength he had developed. For Goggins, the mind was the most powerful tool we possess, and those who learn to control their thoughts and emotions are the ones who achieve greatness. But mastering the mind wasn't something that happened overnight. It required years of dedication, discipline, and pushing past comfort zones. Goggins believed that the average person operates at only a fraction of their true potential because they allow their minds to dictate what they can and can't do. The mind, he argued, is conditioned to seek comfort and avoid pain, which is why most people give up when things get tough. But Goggins had trained himself to do the opposite. He sought out discomfort, embraced pain, and used it to fuel his growth. One of the ways Goggins mastered his mind was by constantly challenging it. He knew that in order to build mental toughness, he had to put himself in situations that tested his limits. This didn't just apply to physical challenges like running or working out. Goggins sought out challenges in every area of his life, whether it was in his career, his personal relationships, or even his daily routines. By continuously pushing himself into uncomfortable situations, Goggins calloused his mind, making it stronger and more resilient with each challenge. For Goggins, this process of mental conditioning was similar to training a muscle. Just as you would train your body to lift heavier weights by gradually increasing the load, you could train your mind to handle more stress and adversity by gradually exposing it to greater challenges. Over time, your mind becomes stronger, and what once seemed impossible becomes achievable. Goggins didn't believe in shortcuts. There was no magic formula for developing mental toughness. It was all about putting in the work, day after day, even when you didn't feel like it. One of the mental techniques Goggins used to push himself was visualization. He would visualize the outcome he wanted to achieve, whether it was completing a race, breaking a record, or simply getting through a difficult day. But his visualization wasn't just about imagining success. It was about preparing for the pain and obstacles he would face along the way. Goggins believed that by mentally rehearsing the challenges he would encounter, he could train his mind to handle them better when they arose in real life. This way, when the pain hit or things went wrong, he was ready for it, and it didn't break his spirit. Another key aspect of Goggins' mental mastery was what he called mental accountability. This wasn't just about being honest with yourself about your weaknesses, as he had discussed earlier with the accountability mirror. It was also about holding yourself accountable for your thoughts and emotions. Goggins believed that we often let negative thoughts and self-doubt control our actions, and this is what holds us back. But by becoming aware of these thoughts and taking control of them, we can change the way we react to adversity. Goggins often referred to what he called the governor, a mental mechanism that limits what we think we can do. The governor is that voice in your head that tells you to stop when you're tired, that says you've had enough when you're in pain, or that convinces you to quit when things get tough. Goggins believed that the governor was always holding us back, keeping us from reaching our full potential. But by recognizing it for what it was, a mental barrier, we could push past it and achieve far more than we ever thought possible. The idea of taking souls became another powerful mental technique for Goggins. This concept, which he first developed during Hell Week in SEAL training, was about flipping the script in difficult situations. When others expect you to quit or fail, you surprise them by doing the opposite, by pushing even harder and outperforming their expectations. Goggins would use this technique in races and physical challenges, not just to push himself further, but also to break the spirit of his competitors or even his own instructors. He would embrace their disbelief and turn it into fuel, using their doubt to power his own performance. Goggins also became an expert at compartmentalizing pain and discomfort. During ultramarathons or intense workouts, when his body was screaming for him to stop, He would break the challenge down into smaller, more manageable pieces. Instead of focusing on the overwhelming task ahead, like running 100 miles, he would focus on getting through the next mile or even the next step. By shrinking the task in his mind, Goggins made it seem more achievable. This technique allowed him to stay focused and keep moving forward, even when the full scope of the challenge seemed insurmountable. But perhaps the most important mental lesson Goggins learned was the power of self-talk. Throughout his journey, he realized that the way he spoke to himself had a profound impact on his performance. In the past, when he was overweight and struggling, his internal dialogue was filled with negativity and self-doubt. But as he began to push himself and achieve more, he started to change the way he talked to himself. He replaced negative thoughts with positive affirmations, reminding himself of the things he had already overcome and what he was capable of achieving. This positive self-talk became a crucial tool in his mental arsenal, helping him stay motivated and focused, even in the most challenging situations. For Goggins, mastering the mind was the ultimate key to unlocking human potential. He believed that anyone could achieve greatness if they were willing to put in the work to control their thoughts and emotions. This didn't mean eliminating pain or discomfort. Those things would always be there. But by learning to embrace them and use them to fuel your growth, you could become unstoppable. One of the final lessons Goggins shares in Can't Hurt Me is that life is a never-ending journey of self-improvement. There is no finish line, no point at which you can say, I've made it. For Goggins, the pursuit of greatness is a lifelong endeavor, one that requires constant effort and a willingness to face new challenges. It's about waking up every day and deciding to be better than you were yesterday, no matter how small the improvement might be. Whether it's running an extra mile, lifting more weight, or simply pushing through a tough day at work, every step forward is a victory. Goggins' story is one of resilience, mental fortitude, and an unbreakable will to succeed. But more than that, it's a story about the power of the human mind to overcome any obstacle, no matter how daunting it may seem. He believes that anyone can develop this kind of mental toughness, but it requires a willingness to embrace discomfort, to face failure head-on, and to keep pushing forward, even when the odds are stacked against you. As Goggins concludes his memoir, he leaves readers with a powerful message. You are capable of far more than you think. The only thing standing between you and your goals is your own mind. And by mastering your mind, you can break free from the limitations you've placed on yourself and achieve greatness. Part 7. The Journey Never Ends. David Goggins had learned through years of pushing himself that there is no ultimate finish line in life. Even after accomplishing things most people would find unimaginable, becoming a Navy SEAL, breaking the world pull-up record, completing ultramarathons, and more, he realized that true success isn't about ticking off achievements. It's about constantly striving for growth and becoming the best version of yourself every single day. Goggins' story isn't one of overnight success or natural talent. It's a story of relentless effort, of refusing to give in to life's many obstacles, and of confronting pain and discomfort head-on. The man who once weighed nearly 300 pounds, worked as a pest exterminator, and felt trapped by the limitations of his mind, had become a symbol of mental toughness, resilience, and the sheer power of the human will. But even as he stood at the peak of his accomplishments, Goggins never allowed himself to get comfortable. He had learned that the moment you think you've made it, the moment you believe you've achieved all you can, is the moment you begin to fall backward. This philosophy led Goggins to continue seeking out challenges that would push him to new levels. He wasn't content to rest on his past achievements because he understood that growth is a continuous process. Whether it was running new races, setting new records, or simply pushing through the daily grind, Goggins saw every day as an opportunity to improve. He embraced the idea that life is a marathon, not a sprint. There's always more to learn, more to accomplish, and more to overcome. One of the key lessons Goggins shares toward the end of Can't Hurt Me is that there's a difference between being driven by fear and being driven by purpose. Early in his life, fear had been a constant companion. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough. This fear had held him back for many years, trapping him in a cycle of self-doubt and inaction. But over time, Goggins learned to harness his fear, using it as motivation rather than letting it control him. He also discovered that having a deeper purpose was the most powerful motivator of all. Goggins realized that the more he pushed himself, the more he could inspire others to do the same. His journey was no longer just about proving something to himself. It became about showing people what was possible when you refused to quit. He wanted to prove to the world that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things, not through talent or luck, but through hard work, mental toughness, and an unbreakable will. Goggins became a motivational figure for thousands, if not millions, of people. His message resonated with those who felt trapped by their circumstances, those who believed they weren't capable of achieving more. Goggins was living proof that your past doesn't define your future, and that the human spirit is capable of far more than we give it credit for. His brutal honesty about his own struggles and failures made him relatable, and his unwavering commitment to self-improvement made him an inspiration. But even as he embraced this role, Goggins remained true to the principles that had brought him this far. He didn't sugarcoat the truth, and he didn't offer easy solutions. His message was simple. If you want to change your life, you have to be willing to suffer. There are no shortcuts to greatness, no easy paths to success. Goggins knew that the only way to achieve anything meaningful in life was to work for it, and that meant embracing pain, failure, and discomfort. One of the most striking parts of Goggins' journey was his ability to stay humble, despite all of his achievements. He didn't see himself as superior to anyone else. In fact, he believed that the challenges he had overcome were proof that anyone could do what he had done. He wasn't born with extraordinary abilities. He had built them through hard work and relentless discipline, and he wanted others to understand that they, too, had the potential to achieve greatness if they were willing to put in the work. Goggins also emphasized that mental toughness isn't something you achieve once and then hold on to forever. It's something you have to cultivate every single day. Just like a muscle, if you stop working on your mental strength, it will weaken over time. This is why Goggins continued to seek out challenges that would push him to his limits. He knew that complacency was the enemy of growth. Every day was a new opportunity to prove to himself that he still had what it took to keep moving forward, no matter what life threw at him. As Goggins reflected on his life, he realized that the biggest obstacle most people face is themselves. The limits we place on ourselves are often far more restrictive than any external challenge we might encounter. Whether it's fear, doubt, or the desire for comfort, these internal barriers prevent us from reaching our full potential. But by learning to control our minds, by embracing discomfort and pushing through pain, we can break free from these limitations and discover what we're truly capable of. Toward the end of Can't Hurt Me, Goggins introduces a final mental strategy that helped him in his toughest moments, the concept of living with a savage mindset. To Goggins, being a savage meant being unrelenting, unbreakable, and willing to do whatever it takes to achieve your goals. It wasn't about being aggressive or ruthless toward others. It was about being ruthless with yourself. It was about holding yourself to the highest standard, refusing to accept anything less than your best, and constantly striving for more. This savage mindset was what kept Goggins going when everything in his body and mind told him to stop. It was what allowed him to push through physical pain, mental exhaustion, and emotional turmoil. And it was what had transformed him from a man who once believed he was destined for failure into someone who had defied the odds again and again. In the closing pages of Can't Hurt Me, Goggins offers a challenge to the reader. He asks, are you living up to your full potential? Are you pushing yourself as hard as you could be? Are you embracing discomfort, or are you avoiding it? For Goggins, the ultimate goal in life is to become the best version of yourself, and that requires constant effort, discipline, and a willingness to face your fears. The book doesn't end with a neat conclusion or a sense of finality. Instead, Goggins leaves readers with the understanding that the journey never truly ends. Life will always present new challenges, new opportunities for growth, and new ways to test your mental and physical strength. The key is to keep moving forward, no matter what, and to never allow yourself to settle for anything less than your best. Goggins' message is one of empowerment. He wants people to know that no matter where they start in life, no matter how many obstacles they face, they have the power to change their circumstances. But that power doesn't come from wishing or hoping. It comes from hard work, from mastering your mind, and from embracing the struggle. In the end, Goggins shows us that the only limits that truly exist are the ones we place on ourselves. And once you learn to break free from those limits, there's nothing you can't accomplish. Part 8. The Never-Ending Journey. After sharing his incredible transformation and achievements, becoming a Navy SEAL, an ultra-endurance athlete, and a motivational figure, David Goggins reminds readers that there's always more to be done. Every accomplishment, no matter how significant, is just a stepping stone to the next challenge. What separates Goggins from others is his refusal to become complacent, to settle for what he has already achieved. For him, life is a marathon, not a sprint. You can't win it by reaching one goal and stopping there. The journey of self-improvement, like life itself, never ends. As Goggins reflects on his life, he emphasizes a critical idea. Success is not a one-time event, but a daily commitment. Every day is an opportunity to get better, to push a little harder, and to face new challenges. While some people might see his accomplishments, completing Hell Week multiple times, breaking the pull-up world record, or finishing 100-mile races, as a sign that he had arrived, Goggins saw them as part of the process. The more he achieved, the more he realized how much more he could still do. One of the most important lessons Goggins shares in this final reflection is the idea of living without regret. Throughout the book, he's brutally honest about the times in his life when he wasn't living up to his potential. He shares how, for years, he allowed fear, self-doubt, and external circumstances to dictate his actions. But once he took control of his own life, once he decided to hold himself accountable and push past his perceived limitations, everything changed. Now, Goggins is driven by the desire to live each day without looking back and wondering, what if? This mindset is what drives him to keep going, even after achieving things most people would never attempt. He understands that the real enemy in life is complacency. The moment you think you've done enough, the moment you believe you've reached your limit, is the moment you stop growing. And for Goggins, that's not acceptable. He doesn't want to be remembered for a few standout accomplishments. He wants to live in such a way that he's always striving for more, always pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Goggins challenges readers to adopt the same mindset. He asks us to think about the things we haven't done, the risks we haven't taken, the goals we've been too afraid to pursue, the potential we've left untapped. For Goggins, the ultimate failure in life is not reaching your full potential, and reaching that potential requires a relentless pursuit of self-mastery. It requires a willingness to face your fears, to confront discomfort, and to embrace the suffering that comes with growth. One of the final mental tools Goggins shares is something he calls the after-action review. This is a technique he used throughout his military career and endurance challenges to assess his performance. After every mission, race, or workout, Goggins would take time to reflect on what went well, what didn't, and what he could do better next time. This practice allowed him to constantly improve, even after achieving significant success. Instead of resting on his laurels, he used each accomplishment as a learning experience, identifying areas for growth and refinement. The after-action review is a practice Goggins encourages everyone to adopt in their own lives. Whether it's after completing a big project at work, dealing with a personal challenge, or even just getting through a tough day, taking time to reflect on your performance can help you identify ways to improve. It's not about beating yourself up or dwelling on mistakes. It's about learning and evolving. The key to continual growth, according to Goggins, is being honest with yourself about where you can do better and then taking action to improve. But as much as Goggins focuses on pushing himself, he also emphasizes the importance of finding balance. After years of driving himself relentlessly, he came to realize that part of mental toughness is knowing when to recover. Just like the body needs rest to rebuild after intense physical training, the mind needs time to recharge as well. This doesn't mean becoming complacent. It means giving yourself the time and space to reflect, learn, and come back stronger. In the closing pages of Can't Hurt Me, Goggins shares a deeply personal realization. The journey to greatness is not about perfection. It's about progress. No matter how strong you are, no matter how tough your mind becomes, there will always be setbacks. There will always be failures, moments of doubt, and days when you want to quit. But the people who succeed, the ones who achieve true greatness, are those who keep moving forward, no matter what. They learn from their mistakes, they embrace the struggle, and they never stop growing. As the book draws to a close, Goggins leaves readers with one final challenge. Stop settling for a life of comfort and complacency. Start pushing yourself every day to become the best version of yourself. It won't be easy. There will be pain, there will be failure, and there will be times when you question whether it's all worth it. But if you're willing to embrace the suffering, if you're willing to do the hard work, you'll discover a version of yourself that you never knew existed. And that version of you is capable of achieving things you once thought were impossible. In the end, Goggins doesn't promise that his path is the right one for everyone. But he does make it clear that if you want to achieve greatness, if you want to live a life without regret, you have to be willing to go to war with yourself. You have to confront your weaknesses, face your fears, and push through the pain. The journey never ends, and neither should your desire to keep growing. In Goggins' words, the only limit to what you can achieve is the one you set in your own mind. And once you learn to break free from that limitation, the possibilities are endless. With this final chapter, Goggins leaves readers with a call to action, to continue on their journey, to never stop striving for self-improvement, and to understand that the only true limits are those we impose on ourselves. His story isn't just about what he has accomplished. It's about what we all can accomplish if we're willing to face discomfort, embrace pain, and push through the barriers that hold us back. If you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to our channel and especially like this video so we can make even better audiobooks for you.